in the Senate?
I served in the Senate. Was elected in 2004, and I served one term until 2009.
And you also were HUD secretary under George W. Bush. You were former Orange County chair.
Right. Mayor now, but it was chair then. Right.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Forgot about that. And you were also RNC chair, weren't you?
I was for a short time. Yes, I did that. And it was, an interesting part of my experience, but it was only for, a period of time, a short period of time. But yes, I did that as well.
Why why did you leave after only one term in the
Oh,
Senate?
because I never intended to be a lifetime in politics. And I found that I was much more suited to executive roles than I was to a legislative role. And so the pace of things in the Senate was not kind of what I wanted in my life.
Mhm.
And a lot of family pressures to do something differently, raising kids, and some that were being raised after they were adults still. And so, anyway, it was just a time for family and to get back to my roots. And so it's been a great experience. But I love my time in the Senate. It was an incredible privilege, but I really didn't find that it was something I wanted to do for a long time.
And in that time in the Senate, you served with President Biden when he
I
was.
sure did. Yes, I served President Biden. He was representing the state of Delaware. I was proud to represent the state of Florida. And even more connecting us than just the mere fact of being in the Senate was the fact that he was the chairman and I was on the Foreign Relations Committee. And I was a newbie freshman senator. And across the aisle from me was another newbie freshman senator, Barack Obama. And we both served on the Foreign Relations Committee with, at that time, Chairman Biden.
Do you have any specific stories about Biden that you can share and um, how you two connected?
Let me just say that President Biden, which I think is acknowledged by anyone and everyone who knows him, is incredibly friendly, very talkative, and kind of one of those people that the minute you meet him, you feel like you've known him a long time. And so, because of our work in foreign relations, which was really his wheelhouse, I mean, he was a senator for a long, long time, long before I got to the Senate, and for a few years. Well, actually, no, he went on to be vice president while I was in the Senate still. But in any event, he was really focused on foreign policy. That was his forte, his area of interest. And so we coalesced, around working together on some things. And that was really the big nut of it. Obviously, we were living in a post 9/11 world, and we diverged on some views in terms of the war in Iraq and different things like that. So it's not like we were on the same page all the time by any means. But we did, when you're working in a Senate environment, you see one another, you get to know each other. And so I had that great pleasure to know him and often disagree with him, but always liked him.
I know you recall a comment specifically with regard to the 2008 Great Recession, where Biden was involved in trying to get deals done with that, and that you were also on some of those calls and trying to work with him. Can you tell
Yeah.
about how that worked?
Well, the Great Recession was unfolding, and I was on the banking committee of the Senate. He had then moved on to the vice presidency. In the midst of all of that, the transition happened. And so I was with a group of other senators, so Republican senators, trying to find a way to work with the White House to come up with what became the great big economic revitalization plan that President Obama led. And we found we could not agree, actually, after attempting several times to come together and create a bipartisan coalition. Ultimately, the House came back with a proposal that was not what we were working on in the Senate. And that essentially was what the White House supported. And essentially it passed with almost no Republican support, which was unfortunate because it would have been better for the country had there been something in which there was a lot of buy-in from both sides of the aisle. But, things work out. Life went on. The country's still, doing fine.
And in 2016, you told the Wall Street Journal that if Biden had run for president, you would have endorsed him. Do you still stand by that?
Oh, wow. Not the Biden that presided over the country in the last several years. No way, no how. I had very good feelings about President Biden as a moderate and as a deal maker and someone who could reach to the other side and get things done. While I think he did find way to work with both sides of the aisle and to get some things done during his presidency, like the infrastructure bill and things of that nature, I think President Biden as president was far more a left-leaning president than I would have anticipated then. And I think that was more of a knee-jerk reaction in my part to what I, did not understand at the time, but it was an evolving Republican Party.
But you were having trouble. You were starting to have some difficulties with the Republican Party when you left in 2009, and the fact that they were, I mean, not necessarily policy-wise, but maybe their actions.
No, I would say not. I mean, it often, I might have disagreed with some of my colleagues, and I worked very diligently on immigration reform at a time when we didn't have the crisis on the border we have today. So it was a very different moment, a long time ago now. And so I worked really hard to try to get that done. And there were some people in the Republican Party who didn't agree. But that's part of what a democracy is about. There were people in the Democrat Party that didn't agree either. But I was working with a group of other senators. Look, my idea of governance, particularly in divided government, particularly in our structure, which is a president, two houses of Congress, is that you got to work across the aisle. You got to try to find common ground. And that's how you advance things and how the country gets better and how you improve things. So no, I wouldn't say that I think the Republican Party of today, the one that we saw last week at the convention, is very different than the Republican Party I served in. And there's some good things, and there's some things I don't agree with. I am not an isolationist. I don't believe that some of those ideas are well thought out or good for the country. I think that we live in a dangerous, dangerous world. And if we retreat to our shores, I think the only thing that happens is that things get worse and worse without the United States influence for good in the world. And I think the example of what occurred in the 30s and led into World War II could be repeated today as well. So I think I'm very much of someone who believes the United States needs to be a force for good in the world, and that we're an indispensable party in the world. So I do not share the isolationist view of some in the Republican Party, not all by any means.
In your time working with Biden, obviously you saw some of his thought process on reaching across the aisle, on trying to meet people. That had to have played some kind of role in the things that he went through in the last few weeks, dealing with Democrats who were telling him to step aside. How does he do that? How does he reach across the aisle? How does he?
Well, I think at this point, it was a whole different thing. It was very personal. So it wasn't what I observed in him, which is a willingness to understand the nature of the Senate and the nature of our form of government, which is that it isn't my way or the highway. It is let's come together to get to a place of yes. And so I think that was the skill I saw in him. And actually, you saw it during his presidency. The only difference I see in the Biden of then and the one that I saw as president is that he leaned far, far more to the left than he did as a senator. There'll be some senators who would say, no, he was always a real liberal guy. I would say, well, maybe so, but at least he was willing to work with the other side. And I think President Biden, in his leadership and the way he governed, was leaned far more left than what I recall of him in the Senate. And I think, honestly, I have to say, all of his ideas were not always right, and I didn't always agree with them, particularly in foreign policy. And so I would say that what we're seeing now in terms of the Biden presidency coming to an end, at the end of his term, but the fact that he's not going to run for re-election, I think has the beginnings in the Afghanistan withdrawal, which was disastrous, ill executed, and ill planned, because we should never have completely left our footprint in Afghanistan. And in addition to that, the way in which he's dealt with Ukraine, which has been dribs and drabs, and has been, no, we will not do that because that could be too provocative. Well, okay, we will do that. And so, you've seen a back and forth that has gone. And I think if he had been more determined, more clear-eyed, and much more forward-thinking all along, that Ukraine would be in a better place today. But we have been of assistance to Ukraine, and I commend him for that. But at the same time, it has not been the effort when we began is not where it is today. We have incrementally gone, and at times it seems like it's done enough to keep Ukraine from losing, but not enough to win. And so I would have advised, I think, if I had been telling him what to do, to be a little more forthright, a little more direct, and a little more supportive of Ukraine right along, and not in the way which was done, which is here's just enough, but not enough to really deal with the problem. Yeah, so I'm saying a lot's played out since 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and times change and people change and events change, and all of that has some effect on my views and my thinking. But I didn't want to imply that I was in lockstep in agreement with President Biden. I think my comments have a little more to do with my adjustment to a very different Republican Party.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And what do you think about Senator Harris as the nominee? How do you think this is going, or Senator Harris, Vice President Harris?
Yeah. Well, I don't know her. I didn't serve with her, and she's a fairly new face in Washington. Obviously now, 4 years vice president. It's not as new a face as it was when she first came to the Senate. But I think clearly the Democrat Party is rallying around her, and she'll be the nominee. And I think she has an opportunity now to pick a Midwestern, more moderate governor, which will help her ticket. And what I would say is that a Harris and yet to be named person is going to be a stronger ticket than Biden-Harris, because Biden and Harris were both highly unpopular. So she will pick someone who I think right out of the box will be more popular than she is, which might help her ticket. So I don't know. I just say that she clearly will be the nominee, but I think it's still a very uphill fight for Vice President Harris as the nominee. I think President Trump has a significant lead, and a new candidate, and all the divisions that have come about as a result of President Biden aging like as he has, I think makes it very, very difficult for the Democrat nominee to do well. I think President Trump has a very commanding position at the moment.
You served in the Senate on the Foreign Relations Committee. I mean, one of the things that has been talked about is no one really knows how much experience Harris has with foreign policy. I mean, you never ran for office, but when you're in the Senate, do you get a lot of experience with foreign policy? And
well, first of all, I don't remember what committee she was on, committees she was on, so I'm not sure. But I will tell you that in 2 years, you don't get a ton. I mean, that's just the bottom line. 2 years is a short time. But yes, we do confirm ambassadors. We do hold hearings on issues relating to the State Department. We have security briefings from time to time on issues of the day. And so, yes, the vice president does get some, but 3.5 years, the senator gets some, but 3.5 years as vice president is a very strong introduction into foreign policy. So I would say she's not a newbie by any means. She has got to have some chops on foreign policy. Whether her ideas are good, bad, or indifferent will remain to be seen, because she's pretty much just been executing President Biden's policies and ideas. But I would say that her experience as vice president would give her some significant experience in the arena of foreign policy. She's traveled abroad a good bit. I know from time to time she's had different trips that she's been on. She's met foreign leaders now for some period of time. And she has been getting much better briefings than a senator would ever get in terms of national security briefings. I'm sure she gets the presidential daily briefs that the CIA provides the president. And so she is very much on top of all the foreign policy issues of the day. Mm-hmm. So I think in that regard, it's a pretty equal match between her and former President Trump.
Okay. Is your you came from Cuba,
Right,
Operation Peter Pan, correct?
right, right.
As a Cuban American, how does how does this move make a difference in how the Cuban population, especially in Florida, views Harris versus Trump? I mean, so far it
You
seems
know,
the population is really behind Trump.
I think the Cuban community is very, very much behind Trump, and I think that he's worked at that, he's earned that, and I think Vice President Harris starts from a very, very disadvantageous position with the Cuban community in Florida. I mean, number one, she's just not known. She really isn't known, and her profile in terms of California senator and now vice president of President Biden, I don't think there's anything particularly about her profile is going to bring along a lot of Cuban American support. That's my take on it. Obviously, we'll see who her vice presidential nominee may be. Although, honest to goodness, vice presidents don't make a lot of difference to the outcome of a ticket, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of other people much smarter than I am on the political scene of the day. So I don't know. Will remains to be seen. But I think the Cuban community is pretty solidly on the Trump bandwagon.
Final question I have at this point is, do you have any fun personal stories of being with Biden or anything he said that really stuck with you or when
No, there is a funny story that my friend and colleague Lindsey Graham used to tell, which is about Biden talking a lot, and he said that he took a trip, and I don't know how much of this is truth and how much of it is Lindsey Graham telling a good story, but anyway, he said they took a trip to Iraq, which is an 11-hour flight. I think it's 11 hours. I took it a couple of times. It's a long flight. And he said when they were about to take off, he said, well, Joe, tell me, where did you grow up? And he said, when we landed in Baghdad, he was still talking. And he said, in the meantime, I had taken a couple of naps. And anyway, so no, but he has the reputation of being very talkative and being, old Irish man Joe kind of guy, glad-handed and a talkative fellow. And honestly, to me, as someone who knew him in the Senate now a number of years ago, his decline physically, I'm not a psychiatrist, but seemingly cognitively, what we saw in that debate has been really astonishing. And it is sort of sad to see how much he's aged in such a short period of time. It's been a number of years, but still a short period of time. And so, I think he did the right thing for himself, for his family, and obviously for the country by pulling out of the way. And I just think he should now enjoy looking back on a very long career and a long service to his country and enjoy his senior years.